All right, welcome back to Shoot Me Straight with Eddie minus Dave. He's on a break right now, so you'll just be stuck listening to my voice. But today we have an awesome guest. We got Benny Olson, prior Navy. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, and so we linked up through Andy Simmons, who was my publisher, who helped me write my book, and he's helping you do the same thing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, he reached out, and I had actually heard you on I think Mike Ritland's podcast. I'm not. What was that? A couple years ago?
Like about 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, the name rang a bell when he reached out, and then I was like, oh yeah, for sure, man. So I'm glad you made the trip down here, dude. And I know it's you got a busy schedule and you got kids and.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course. So yeah, man. Let's get into it. So get the listeners here some information just about you and where you're from, and
Sure.
how you were raised, where you were raised, and then we'll get into the actual meat and potatoes of the story.
Absolutely. So I was in the Navy 10 years, medically retired. I was actually a Navy Master at Arms, so was not a Navy SEAL. I want to make sure people know that because I always try to stress that. Even in my book, I think one of the first few sentences is I was never one, but people seem to misconstrue that whenever I come on something like this.
Well, but you were attached
Yes.
to Dev Group, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I mean, I understand why people would get that confused, and but it's really not a big deal.
Yeah, it's just the whole stolen valor thing, is kind of, it's just weird to me. And so I want to make sure I get that straight. I'm from South St. Paul, Minnesota. I grew up there. My mom, she was a single mother for most of my first part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Married my stepdad, which I talk about in the book. Things with that comes with that, and just not having a father. And
I'm sorry. What year did she end up marrying your stepdad? Like
when I was about 11, so it had to have been 1993, 94, somewhere in there. I think I could be wrong. I was
wondering what age actually. Yeah. So you were without a dad till about 11, or a father-like figure.
Right. Yeah. Typical. I talk about it in the book. Sitting on the steps waiting for your dad to come pick you up, and then turns out he's not coming. Things like that with my sister, and so ended up seeing all of the different. She had different men come along, and ended up with one guy, and so it's in the book of kind of how that turned out, but it's definitely difficult without the dad, but
I can imagine. Yeah, I mean I can't really imagine, but it's a father figure is important no matter what age you are.
It definitely is.
So
So I grew up in South St. Paul, Minnesota. I enlisted in the National Guard, which, again, I talk about. I didn't last very long. And then graduated high school, went to college for like 6 months, and was like, this is not what I was meant to do in life, and enlisted in the Navy, and that's the rest is history.
What happened with the National Guard?
So the National Guard, I didn't understand exactly what they did. I wanted out of Minnesota. My mom had decided to move to Alabama right when I graduated. And so when I enlisted, I was in 12th grade, and my mom had told me that, hey, we're leaving Minnesota. And so I told the National Guard, like, my family's going. They're gone. I ain't going to have nowhere to live. Like, can I go active duty? And they said that's not how that works, which is, now that I've been in the military, I understand, and basically told them, well, I'm not coming back because I need to figure out how I get out of Minnesota and do that. And the guy, the main guy at the detachment, I was infantry. That's what I signed up for. And again, I didn't know anything about nothing.
Well, you're 18, right?
I was actually 17. My mom actually signed the papers.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. She thought the same thing I did. Well, he'll be taken care of because he'll end up going off, in the military. So the guy's like, you're gonna be a loser. Like, you're gonna regret this. And I write about this. And so just kind of going through childhood, and it was rough already. And then now I have this first leader telling me I'm gonna end up being a loser. 'Cause
Yeah, that's really awesome mentorship right there.
It's great, yeah.
Especially to a 17-year-old
Yeah,
at the
17.
time. It's what a loser. That dude's a loser, right? Obviously, what a dick.
Right. And I believe it propelled me to continue to push harder. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I found that too. Like through my military career, I can look back and think of like just the crappiest. I wouldn't even call leaders, but they have rank over you. So in military terms, they're a leader because they're a certain rank. But I remember having E6s tell me you're never going to amount to anything because you made a mistake when you were 18 or 19 in the military.
Yep.
And I remember my goal was to be a SEAL, and I strictly remember this one guy. He was like, "You will never be a SEAL. You'll never amount to that. You don't have what it takes." And I mean, that's someone, an older man telling, which you are, you're still a child. I don't care if you're 18 years old. But that just gives you the motivation to prove them wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So I enlisted in the Navy, and then, I wanted to be a police officer. That was my goal in life, was to be a police officer. It was to do the opposite of what my dad did. Again, my dad went to prison. I didn't mention that in the beginning. No, so he went to prison when I was, I think, 10 or 11. I can't remember the year, but it was like right when I was going into 7th grade of high school. Mm-hmm. And he went to prison for 5 years. He got out right before I graduated high school.
What was he sentenced for?
So it was money laundering, but he dealt drugs. I think mainly marijuana, but it doesn't matter. He got caught up in that, and I knew about it. Anytime we'd go over to his house, it was crazy. Like you'd go grab a paper plate, and there's just like little pile of marijuana on top of it. And at 10 years old, I knew it was drugs, but I didn't know the extent of how bad it was. So yeah.
So you obviously didn't work out for the National Guard, right?
Correct.
And then will you just go enlist right after that?
The Navy recruiter, Chief Karst, I remember to this day, this dude, the Lord saved me, but he put this guy in my path. And he kept on trying to get me to join the Navy even before the National Guard. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go in the Army. And then he kept pressuring me, and I'm like, I had such a bad experience with the National Guard that I was like, nope, not doing anything. I'm just going to go to college. So I went to a community college. And as I was figuring out that wasn't working out for me, I mean, they put me in this this college class that was like, I don't know. I had this liberal, again, I don't want to get into politics. I had this liberal professor, female, that like feminist, that basically held it to the men in that class. Yeah. And I was like, what am I doing here? You could just hear now, thinking back to some of the stuff she would say, and then now being older, it's like, okay, I get why people get programmed. And so I went to him and I said, hey man, I need to get out of Minnesota. And they were the only ones open. The Marines weren't open. The Army wasn't open. The Air Force weren't there. I walked into the recruiting station, and he's like, so you're ready? And I said, yeah. I said, I want to do whatever it takes to get out of here. And turns out the National Guard gave me an RE3 discharge. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's in order to get back in, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult to get back into any other.
What does RE stand for?
I don't know. I don't know what it stands for, so I should probably be a little bit more educated on it. But it gave me there's different levels of discharges, and they gave me like the third worst is what I would call it.
Is it close to like maybe an other than honorable?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that's exactly what it is.
All right. Yeah.
So
that's pretty much the step below dishonorable discharge. Yeah.
And so again, being 17, I didn't think I did anything wrong. That was, I thought, I didn't know at the time. And so they gave me this discharge, and he's like, you got to go meet the regional commander, this captain, for the recruiting district. And he's like, you got to go plead to your case to him why we should let you in. And I said, well, that sucks, but okay. So I went and did that. And at the time, I was living in an apartment complex across from the college that I had one bedroom of the apartment, a bunch of drugs and stuff coming through. And I was like, I'll do whatever it takes. And so I walked in and he's like, why should I let you in my Navy? And I'm like, sir, I made a mistake. I have no other choice right now. I said, I want to be a police officer, and that's it. And so I went into the Master at Arms rating.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, nice guy. He believed me, and
as he should. I mean, the fact that they're holding you accountable like that at 17 when you don't know what you don't know about the military, which you just admitted, like you joined the National Guard, you weren't sure how it worked.
I saw the commercials. I thought the commercials were cool.
Exactly, and it should have been explained to you, like, hey, if you do this, this is how it's going to work. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure they run into that all the time, like these recruiters all over the country.
Yeah.
You have these young kids that, they're inspired and they're like, I want to join the military, but they sort of join just blinded, like, okay, they don't know anything about how the military works, the structure, the agreements, that take place. And those things should be explained, at least at the bare minimum, to individuals. And then to hold you, like, to sit there and be like, well, you need to explain yourself and give you an other than honorable. But that sounds like the military, though. So,
I mean, whatever it takes to get numbers, I think, with recruiting, and I suppose especially now, it's even worse. But
yeah.
I joined the National Guard right after 9/11. So I was sitting in a classroom, and that's when I was like, I want to go do something, right? And I thought that I would deploy or at least go be stationed somewhere else out of Minnesota. And little did I know that because of everything that was happening, and in 2003 later, going to happen in Iraq, like that unit was going to deploy anyway. So looking back on it now, I would have gotten my wish to go and do something, So, but still stuck in Minnesota, going 1 week in a month was just not something I wanted to do.
Yeah, do the old weekend warrior experience.
Yeah.
So you got that guy hooked you up and was like, "Yep, you can enlist." What year was this?
2003.
2003.
It was in December of 2002.
Mm-hmm.
But they said I could not leave until August of 2003, and I was just like, I've got to sit 8 more months in this and do this life. I mean, it sucked. I mean, I had a girlfriend at the time, and that made it difficult, but I was willing to do anything to leave.
Yeah, you were ready to get out of there.
Yeah.
So how was, obviously you went to Great Lakes.
Great Mistakes.
Yep. Yeah. How was that? How was that experience?
It was good. We had some old school RDCs. This was like right before they had the new, I guess the new buildings they have there, the ships or whatever they call them, where the dining halls in the same building.
Uh-huh.
That's what they have now, I guess. Before when I went, and I'm sure I don't know when you went.
99, yeah.
So when you went, you had to march to the dining hall and all of that. Like I felt like I was at home because I had structure now again. Like finally, like structure from 3 dudes that were like, busting our ass the whole way through.
Yeah.
So a lot of pressure that I was not used to. Like, because I never had a guy that, like a male figure to, like, lead me, right? Like, that's what a father is supposed to do with his kids. And so not having that and now finally having that, I mean, it was definitely a learning experience.
Yeah. Did you find it, I don't know, physically or hard at all? Or, like, I mean.
Mentally, when I first got there, I can't remember when they stripped you down naked and they're like yelling at you.
Yeah.
And I was like, hyperventilating. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like what's going on? Like this stress that I've never felt before. Physically, I didn't have no problem with it. I mean, I could run a, 5:30 mile in high school, which is not crazy fast, but it was still
pretty fast. Yeah.
I can't do it anymore, but physically, I was not a problem. Like it was just, I mean, they do it so everybody can hopefully pass.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was pretty disappointed when I went because I remember it was like a shock, but it was a shock to me it was like in a bad way where I thought for some reason in my head I thought it was going to be I guess more like Marine Corps boot camp or
right.
know, but it turned out to be just a lot of like folding clothes, making your bed. And there was like little beat downs or whatever every once in a while, but I also I don't know, I I just had a different idea in my head of what it was going to be like. And then you're in there with, I mean, a wide variety of characters, individuals, personalities, and and everybody comes from, you can have guys and girls from the poorest of the poor, of this country. Then you also are in there with some people who were, silver spoon.
I mean, we had a guy from Africa that got rolled back 3 times and finally graduated from us, but that's all he wanted to do. It was graduate boot camp.
Yeah, I had a guy like that as well. He kept what do they call it? ASMOD?
ASMOD, yeah.
Yeah, so he kept getting rolled, and I think it was like the 4th or 5th boot camp class or division, whatever. He finally, was in ours, and I remember asking him like, why do you keep like getting rolled? And he's like, dude, I think he was from the South, and he was like, I've never grown up with a bed. I had to fend for myself. I had to find food every day, and he's like, I have a bed here, and I get fed 3 times a day. He's like, don't want to leave. And I was like, that was an eye opener. I was like, dang, like this is like the best this guy has ever had.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a trip.
It's definitely something. I mean, but then you get other people that take it for granted, right? That are just not. But yeah, you're in there with a wide range of people.
Oh yeah, my oldest is in boot camp right now, or Marine Corps boot camp.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what that was one of the biggest pieces of advice I gave him before he left. I was like, dude, you're going to be in there with just, like we talked about, just a wide variety of characters and personality traits. And I was like, choose who you want to be friends with wisely. Yep. I was like, pick the individuals that are motivated, that have a purpose, that are looking to achieve like something great while they're in the military. I'm like, because you're going to have another group that's literally just there to be there, or like take it for granted,
right.
And they get done and they're like, oh, let's drink, and don't really have any aspirations to get better.
Right. And just going on to A school or whatever they call it in the Marine Corps, A school, and then his duty station, always picking those top performers to be around it's addictive.
Yeah, it is. It's excellence breeds excellence, and that's where you got to hang out with people who have high aspirations.
And I going back to the physical thing, I'm sure it was probably difficult for you guys, having to do that, which isn't really challenging, and then eventually you guys have to go to buds.
Yeah, and that was where I was frustrated because that was my goal.
Doesn't prepare you.
No, so I would go in the bathrooms after the lights out and do my own workouts, or I would mess stuff up on purpose so the whole place would get beat. So at least I got some workout out of it.
Guys,
yeah.
But yeah, no, I ended up graduating pretty high. I mean, I did really well in boot camp. I mean, I got to pick I got to go to, I could have went to Lackland or over to Little Creek. I chose Little Creek not knowing that Lackland was an Air Force base, and the dining halls and everything there was a lot nicer. So I ended up going to Master at Arms A school over in Little Creek, Virginia, which I don't believe they do there anymore. That in itself, being back with a bunch of fleet returnees, because I think most of the people that went to A school down in San Antonio, Lackland, they were all from boot camp. So when I went to A school in Little Creek, there was just a ton of fleet returnees coming to be Master at Arms because they had opened the rate up to everybody.
So they were like switching rates or stuff like that.
Yeah.
How was Master at Arms school?
I thought I thought it would be more difficult, but it was like really learning like the UCMJ and stuff like that. They would bus us out into town, and I think a local place had the contract to teach. So they'd bus us out there and feed us and then bus us back to the base. And I wasn't sure if I had made the right choice because we weren't really doing much. But then I saw the working dogs come through the building one day to sweep for drugs. And I was like, oh, that could be cool. And so I kind of kept that in the back of my mind, like, okay, there's other things I could do in this. When I was there, I got the choice of whatever place I wanted to go to because I was actually pretty high in my class. And I really wanted to contribute because we were over in Iraq. And I thought, okay, well, if I get closer to there, maybe they'll deploy people out of whatever bases are close to there. So I picked Bahrain out of all places. And people were like, why are you – because you get to pick 3 choices. Mm-hmm. And so I picked Bahrain 3 times. I put it down there, and I made sure that they knew that that's the only place I want to go to. Well, little did I know you don't deploy to Iraq. You don't do anything out of Bahrain other than you can go sit on a ship and, be a guard on one of the civilian ships out there or deploy to the UAE, which I did many times as a dog handler.
Go to
Dubai.
Dubai.
That's not a deployment.
No, I've done a deployment over there.
Yeah.
So that was an experience.
But I got to choose. I picked Bahrain, and I went to Bahrain, and there it's not law enforcement; it's all straight force protection. I busted my ass. Like, I worked as hard as I could to get my PQS signed off. It's like just a manual that says I know my job. And impressed the chief of my the patrol unit over there. And one day I was standing out doing guard duty, and there were these dogs that were sweeping the buses for the Department of Defense dependent school that's over there, the Dodd School. I guess they sweep them for explosives, so the kids, when they get on the bus, they don't have to worry about that. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, fell in love with it at A school, but really, like, when I saw them in Bahrain working and doing different things, fell in love with that. And I said, that's what I want to do. And I knew nothing about canine units prior to coming into the military. Wasn't ever something I thought I would do. I didn't have dogs growing up. The only dogs we had were inherited because people would come visit, and then their dog would get lost. And then they, people from Florida and whatnot, some family. So, I really fell in love with that, and I asked, hey, can I go volunteer my extra time? We were already working 12-hour shifts, and they said, sure, as long as you're not going to slack at your regular patrol job of, standing the gate. And so I'd go over to the kennel for 2 or 3 hours and become a bite dummy or clean up dog poop or, because these dogs would paint the dog kennel with their poop. Yeah. And so they had me doing all kinds of duties over there. And regardless of all of that, I still loved being around the animals. Like, there was just something different about it. And now knowing what I know about dogs and like therapy and stuff like that, like, I can see why I was so drawn to it.
Yeah. Did you think that had something to do with your upbringing?
No. It had to do. I think we were gonna end up talking about it anyways. But like during Extortion 1-7, I had a dog, and so that dog literally got me through the rest of that deployment when we were over there in Afghanistan. And there's just something that they do that's just different, that just calms you, and I don't know how to describe it. Right?
Yeah,
like, it's just so I think that's why I was immediately drawn to it when I was working in the kennel, no matter what the dogs would do, right? Like, they could poop all over the place or try to snap at you or whatever, because, some of the dogs are a little aggressive, but didn't care. So, yeah.
So you sorry, you're busting your ass there, working your regular duties, and then off time you're doing what you can
every day
to get in with the dogs. So did they eventually like, hey man, you can start coming over here and actually training with these dogs?
So they finally, at some point, they were like, this guy's really dedicated. And I had a chief over there, Chief Toussaint, and he had reached out to the patrol unit and said, hey, this guy is coming over every day. We want him. The patrol unit, Chief Rusi, again, people that I know, right? Like, people that their names are always going to be in my head. He's like, this guy really wants it. And so finally one day he's like, yeah, you're going to get to go over there. You're going over there. This is your last day working. And so he went over the radio and he basically said, because this guy has put in all this work, I got all my stuff signed off in patrols. I was a high performer. He's like, he's going 10. He said it over the radio, which was to everybody. And I was just like, it was just a cool recognition of somebody noticing that you're putting in the work, right? Like,
no, that's good, man. I mean, you earned it. You know what I mean? So it should be. That's a good leader right there, because not only is he giving you like an attaboy or whatever over the radio and telling, but hopefully he's like inspiring others. Like, hey, if you put in the work and actually, on your off time, dedicate, the time and energy to advance to what you want to do in the military, then yeah, it works out for you, but you have to put in the work. Like, nobody's going to give it to you.
Right.
And I think, that's an important message
to
pass along.
And going back to your son, I always stuck around people that were going to better me. And when you go over to Bahrain as a E2, E3, new in the military, you get all this money because we were living out in town.
Yeah.
We got BH to live out in town, so we're living like kings. And, guys were just, they would go to this, it's a hotel or this bar called the Rock Bottom. It's right outside the gate. And that's exactly where you end up is rock bottom. I mean, it's drinking. And, I write about it in my book, like they got in trouble for stealing Shia flags, from the houses over there. And it's like, I want no part of that.
Yeah.
So I just surrounded myself around with good people and just, it's very hard when you're new and you're like, oh, you got all this freedom and it's almost too much.
It is. I equate it to, because you have, like you're 18, and it's the same thing when, I have a daughter in college as well. When she's in her sophomore year, it's the same premise. Like these kids, they go to college and it's their first time away from home. They're, pretty much they have all the freedom in the world, and there's two routes you can take there. It's either you can buckle down, do what you need to do, study, and really stay focused to get that degree, or what a lot of the crowd does is they party their asses off and end up flunking out of school or, whatever. It's the same in the military. And that's I think people that aren't in the military or don't have really any idea about it. It's the same premise. Like you'll have people that join, and there's people that are content and they stay complacent and they're like, I'm just going to do whatever they tell me to. Or you can go in there with, and I tell people when they join, they should have an idea of like what they want to do and then aspire to that. And it's very easy to get taken down the wrong direction if you don't stay focused and driven and towards your goal.
Right. Yeah. So I ended up, they ended up sending me to dog school. I had to agree to stay in Bahrain for another year, like it's called OTEP, which they're going to give me $2,000 to stay there anyways, and another 30 days of free vacation, I guess. So they ended up sending me to Lackland Air Force Base. And again, I was around a bunch of, fleet returnees and stuff like that. Just because at dog school, normally you would have had to have been an E5 and had so many years in the military in order to even get to go to dog school. And here I was showing up in desert camis because I was from Bahrain.
Yep.
And I was getting hemmed up by these E5s, that were like, what the hell are you doing? You're not allowed to wear that. That's not authorized. And this Master Chief came out and he's like, I spoke to his command. He's authorized. I mean, it was just great to see a leader that stepped up and said, it's not my choice. Like, I'd buy the green ones if I could, but they didn't have them over there, you know? And so it's like just stuff like that.
That sounds, it's always the E5s on a power trip.
Yeah. So 12 weeks at Lackland. The first 6 weeks were doing all the patrol training, and basically they're dogs that do not listen. Like all of these little heathens are sent back to Lackland, and they know that you're new. The dogs, they know that you're new. They know you're new, and they're gonna drag you and drag your ass everywhere. They have a thing called Shit Hill where you take the dogs to walk in a big circle, and that's where they go poop. And
nice.
And so they're gonna drag you everywhere, and that's what they do for 6 weeks. Half of them don't come off of the bite; they don't let go. I mean, it might be different now, but back then these dogs failed out for a reason. And so for 6 weeks, you're just, and I thought that was the worst part of it. And it turned out not being the worst part of it, because the next 6 weeks you were doing detection. And detection has to be happy and fun because you want the dogs to find the odors. Yeah. And so these dogs, your hand would be purple by the time you're done because the dogs they just drag you everywhere. Yeah. So for 12 weeks, it was a very big learning experience. And I thought that's how it was going to be going back to the fleet, but it turns out there's standards and whatnot that dogs have to do. And so.
So are those dogs that you train there at Lackland, they stay at Lackland then? Right.
They stay at
so
Lackland.
They're like they're the training dummies, sort of, for you guys. I mean, and then once you graduate, then you're given an actual dog, hopefully, that has the traits, that you need.
You're given a dog when you get back to your command. None of those dogs follow with you.
That's
Now, when I was with Dev Group, that we didn't get our dogs from Lackland, so there's way different standards there. But just going back to that, I went back to the command, and they ended up pairing me with this German Shepherd that can't do patrol work. So the fun part of it, doing the bite work, and all he could do was detection because of his hips. But he ended up being the best. I could watch this dog work, and I could pick up on his different changes of behavior, they call it, whenever he's on odor. And it ended up being such a great pair because it made us both successful. Like, he made me successful. So it was just he was a veteran and I was a rookie, and it just worked out to be a great team.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I ended up getting to go to the United Arab Emirates for, to Dubai for 3 weeks at a time, Fujairah for 3 weeks at a time. And again, it was a cakewalk, but, it worked out.
Yeah. I mean, you were doing what you wanted to do.
The dogs,
right?
Yeah. Even though I couldn't go to Iraq and help out and do stuff like that, it still was a trade-off. I ended up working 2 more dogs in Bahrain. I worked a flat-coated retriever, a dog named Shecker, who, if you touched his ass, he was going to bite you. And everybody messed with him, and it was fun being his handler. And then my chief, he actually gave me a green dog that came from Lackland, and I was his first handler, and his name was Leo. And I taught this dog to sit pretty, like he'd sit on his back legs, on his ass like a gopher. I taught him to do a bark and hold, which he'd go stand up in front of the decoy, and he literally would bark in the like in the face. It was almost dangerous.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. I was actually able to do the fun stuff with the dog that I hadn't intended on wanting to do, like teaching a dog new things. And so I ended up doing that for Bahrain for 3 years, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do because I was coming up on the end of my enlistment. I had about a year left, and my chief was like, "Hey, you should go to Texas. You can go to a small kennel, get a chance to be a leader." I was in E4 at the time. 2.5 years in, I was in E4 at the time, and he said that would be the best chance I would have. Was going to a smaller kennel down in Texas.
Best chance to have for what? To deploy to Iraq, or
just get more leadership.
Okay.
Yeah, just to get more leadership, so I'd have a better chance of making rank.
Okay.
So again, I just wanted to go and serve.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my whole thing. And there was an opportunity to deploy out of that kennel because it was really weird. They would take dogs from, and now I understand why, but they would do the IAs from the from here. Like, they wouldn't take the closest dog that's in theater. And I guess the reason was because they all went to training down in Arizona or something like that.
Okay.
So I went there, and I quickly realized that Kingsville was not a place I wanted to be. Like, there's nothing down in
Kingsville, Texas?
Yeah.
Where's that near? I have no idea.
Corpus Christi.
Okay, so that's south.
Yeah. So in order to go do anything down there, you had to go to Corpus Christi to go just even enjoy yourself and have fun. Like, because there's nothing Kingsville. Turns out my wife was in Kingsville, though. So
nice.
I ended up meeting my wife there. A fun story. When I was at boot camp, my wife was actually there watching her cousin graduate from my division. So I didn't meet her until Kingsville, but she was
at your graduation.
Yeah, I found out she was actually at my graduation. And so that's just like tells you, like, when you have a plan for yourself. Like, I had my girlfriend that was there at my graduation in boot camp. Like, you think that this is the plan, but God had a different plan, right? And he had her there, the whole way. And so just meeting her down in Kingsville was, and then knowing that, like, kind of just was just pretty cool. I didn't,
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah. So, where did I go from there? I started volunteering to do ride-alongs with the state troopers because I was like, this is boring. If I've got to do 3 more years of this and I can't deploy, they gave me a dog down there named Kit. He just was a straight detection dog.
Mm-hmm.
His hips were going bad and he had cataracts. So I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm going to get out. And my buddy called me, and he said, hey, there's an assignment if you want it. I can get you to screen. And he's like, you're young. He's like, I don't know if they'll take you just because of your age. He's like, but you're responsible. This is all the stuff he's telling me. And he said, it's with the SEALs. And I didn't know exactly what it was. Like, I thought it was just training their dogs at first. Little did I know it'd be to actually deploy and operate with them, which was just, once I did that, anything else I did after that just didn't add up. So I said, sure. So I went up there and screened. And
up in Virginia?
Virginia, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Went up there and screened. And so they they screened us physically, and then they did a psych evaluation on you to make sure you're not, have everything there. And I remember this Master Chief, he was in charge of the dog kennel there, and he's like, hey, I want to take you out on a run. I said, this dude's like old as dirt. Like, he had to be in his late 50s, and no disrespect to him. Like, he just was older. Yeah. And I was like, he's not going to crush me. I mean, I'm going to do all right. Well, this dude, he ran me down to the O course, ran the O course twice. I mean, he put out and he crushed me that day. And we went to go do pull-ups, and I was like, I can't feel my arms. And so I pumped out like 6 of them, the minimum. And he's like, I really expected you to do more. And I'm like, I've never done pull-ups. Like, we didn't do them.
It's not part of the Navy requirements.
Right. And it's no excuse. It's just, it's not part of the things that we do. And so this dude crushed me, and then I quickly realized, like, if this is the mentality, then yes, I want to be around this. So I screened, and then they also screened you to handle dogs, and then everybody there had to give you a thumbs up. So
yep. Did you have to go to like a board at all, or like?
Yeah, yep. Typical, where they grill you on some questions and ask you situations, and It was getting the approval from the SEALs was definitely difficult. Like, I mean, these guys were older. The guys that were in the kennel, they had to have been there at the command probably 5 or 6 years already. Yeah. So there's an expectation there from them. And I remember the one guy, Jimmy, he just said, the best advice I give you is to always be an asset. So that's I took that to heart. Yeah,
that is probably the best piece of advice he could have given you.
Yeah,
I mean, that advice is given to SEALs regardless.
Oh, really? I didn't know it was like a.
I mean, that's where when you're a new guy in the teams. I mean, it's worded differently depending on your leadership, and I mean, or maybe some guys don't get this advice, but that's if you want to succeed in that environment, in that community, then your number one priority is to make yourself an asset in some way, that you are needed. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I went back, and they just said, hey, you're pretty young. Like, we're going to talk about it, and we'll let you know. I was 21 at the time, I think. And a lot of the guys that are at that command they've been around for a while.
Yeah, they're usually late 20s, early 30s and above.
Yeah. And so I went back to Kingsville thinking that I'm going to go be a state trooper because there ain't no way these guys are going to select me. And they ended up selecting me. And I was like, okay, cool. So how long do I have to be here in Kingsville? Do I have to do the full 3 years? I assumed I had to do the full 3 years in Kingsville. Well, they had some workaround, and they had me there in 6 months. Nice. And I was like, and I met my wife down in Kingsville, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work. I loved her to death. But I told her, I was like, I got to go do this. Like, if I don't go do this, I'm going to regret it. And we made it work, obviously. We made it work. And
did she move up to Virginia with you?
She didn't, because we weren't married yet. And she was new to the military. She was an air traffic controller. So she's a pretty smart gal. And they wouldn't let her leave there, obviously, because we weren't married. And so we made the long-distance thing work for a while. When I went up to Dev Group, they put me through a course up there, and so that course, they took us down to Memphis to go shoot, and so she would, because we would go into Memphis and get to go hang out. And so for the weekend when we were there, and so she would drive up from Kingsville all the way to Memphis, come see me, and then,
you made it work.
We made it work.
It's tough. It's good on you. I mean, I did that with my wife. My first platoon, she was in Indiana.
Yeah,
I was in San Diego. But anytime like training trips that were within 10 hours or less driving distance, we would link up with each other, and that's the stuff you got to do.
Yeah. So I went through this direct support course is what they call it. I can say that. And Lou Langless, who was on extortion. Again, I like from the very beginning, like Lou hammered me, and he would always have these glasses on and this like just grin on his face, and you just knew something was coming. Like he knew something was planned, and man, he pulled me aside one day and he said, we hold all of the direct support people accountable. Like we hold them all to a standard. He said, but you dog guys, he's like, you guys are the only ones other than EOD come into the door with us. And he just like looked me dead in the face. He's like, you won't graduate this course unless you show me that I can trust you. Cause he's like, you might be my dog guy. And so that like sent chills through me just now, like just thinking about it. Cause when he pulled me aside and said that, I was like, okay, well, this is going to be something, something's going to be something
serious.
Yeah. And so for 3 months, they put us through, well, not 3 months. No, it was more like 6. It was more like 6 months. From January to July of 2007, I went through this course where they taught me, basically, he said, we're going to teach you how not to kill one of us and how not to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
That's basically it. And they would show us how to do combat clearance and a little bit of hostage rescue clearing, but for the most part, it was just teaching us how to be an asset more than anything else. Yeah. Nothing with dogs, though. Just how, like, doing OTBs and stuff like that. I was like, when are we going to ever have to do this with dogs? Well, sure as shit, they decided to start doing that with dogs, and that's a whole different animal. Like that's the only thing that ever scared me doing anything with a dog was doing OTBs with a dog.
And over the beach.
Over the beach,
yeah.
But we did all this stuff for 6 months, and it turned out I was going to get attached to Gold Squadron as their dog handler. And one of the guys took me upstairs, and I still remember to this day, because he's a really good friend of mine, Twan. He like looked over at me. He even told me this. He's like, I looked over at you, and he's like, this is our dog handler. I was 140 pounds. Like I was a small, like scrawny dude, and he's like, okay, he'll be here for a few days and then probably gone. So I don't know. It was humbling though to walk up into the team room though, and you see all these guys. They have, this was in 2008 when they still allowed them to have beards and everything, and
yeah, that was still the war was still raging at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you see all these dudes and like they're fit and jacked and they got beards and you're just like, oh my God, like what did I, am I going to be able to do this? So
I'm sure it was intimidating.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was. I had an EOD guy though that kind of, Louis Safrant, who ended up being killed on the HBID that I was blown up in. And he like really would talk to me anytime I went up there and kind of like guided me through how to kind of fit in with those guys and how to earn their trust. So having guys like Louis that were willing to kind of just
mentor you.
Yeah. Not hold your hand, but
yeah,
basically hold your hand
still,
and walk you through it.
Yeah, hold your hand the best way that they know how to.
Yeah. Yep. So I ended up getting my first dog, Digo. He was a dog that was shit canned from another squadron because this dog would bite everything. Like he'd bite men, women, children. He didn't care, and he would even bite his handler. And so they had a hard time controlling him, just running with the team. Because we have to send these dogs from the back or the middle of the stack and keep them from biting people along the way until they go to the door, right?
Yeah.
And so he just wanted to bite everybody. And so I really had to figure out a way to harness his energy and his tenacity to do his job and kind of guide him to be, guide the missile to the right target. So I took it as a good challenge because they selected me because I was a dog handler and I was really good at what I did. And we made it work with the help of our trainers and whatnot. We turned them into a force to be reckoned with for sure. So
nice.
It was just
it's a good little challenge for a new guy checking in.
Yeah.
Like, here you go. We're gonna give you this problem child.
He was a problem child.
Your first test?
Yeah, he was a problem child, and that's another reason why I called the book The Underdogs, because he was an underdog, and so was I. Like, I think throughout my whole life, and so getting paired up with him, I think it was again a God thing. Like, we're gonna do well as a team. So
nice.
We ended up doing. We didn't deploy until January of 2008, so we had about 3 months of workups. So I had never deployed to Afghanistan or Iraq even before this. I certainly wasn't on your guys' level with doing combat. And here I am now running with a team, with a dog. And it was like sucking through a fire hose. I mean,
I can imagine. I mean, Not only are you're with a combat unit, but you're with the tip of the spear combat unit where, you guys are for sure going over there and going to see some stuff. I mean.
Yeah. And, my team leader at the time, he told me a couple ops into Iraq, he's like, dude, I didn't think you were going to make it with us because, like, during training, they all run fast. Like, it's like there's no threat, so it seemed like everything was just fast. But when we got over to Iraq, everything slowed down. Mm-hmm. And, like, everybody, like, it just seemed like everything was slow and methodical. I mean, they were methodical in training, but everything was fast. And so for me, like, deploying actually was the best thing for me because it allowed me to, work the dog and actually think.
Did you find it, like, the training that you did before you went, you're like, oh, shit, this is, like, like you said, fast, very intense, some of it, right? But then when you go deploy, it's almost easier.
It's easier.
Yeah, and that's done on purpose. And as you know, obviously, it's like in the community, it doesn't matter, white side or a dev group, it's like the training is still the same to where, we're going to make this training as hard as possible and throw you in situations where, you pretty much train to failure. That's how you get better.
Right.
And that's why I remember being a new guy, thinking that and going on deployment and being like, oh, this ain't that bad. And we do that on purpose. So I think deployments aren't, you're like, oh, okay, I've done this before. And obviously, you do slow it down on deployment because that's when real rounds are coming back at you. So
yeah. So we ended up deploying to Bakabai, Iraq. We were in Fob Warhorse, I think it was, Fob Warhorse. So we were right outside Balad, somewhere out there near that area. And it was my first experience having rockets launched at the base. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, what the hell's going on? Like, they just did it every day. And we had a nice big flagpole that seemed to be the thing that they would aim towards. Got to go out my first mission. The first one, nothing happened. The second one, we went out and we went to this town called Boys Town, is what the intel guys called it, because there was only men there. There was no women, there was no animals, there was no kids, nothing. And I remember going out, and I remember coming back, talking to some of the SEALs, and they're like, that was the most eeriest thing we've ever been on, because normally you see women and kids, but what they were doing is rigging these houses to blow up. And so when the conventional forces would go in to clear, they were just HBIDs all over the place. And it was my first time going out, and we were doing a call out, and they're like, hey, we're gonna throw a thermal barrel grenade at the door. And I was like, okay, cool. I don't know what that is, but because I never seen it. It before then. Fucking doors blown open. There's, shit on fire, and the windows are all like, it brings everything, opens up everything, right? Like, it's just a cool feeling.
The old T-bomb.
Yeah. And so they called the dog up. I'm like, all right, this is what I practice, because the first time they didn't use me. They didn't need me for anything. And they said, send the dog in the doorway. So I sent the dog in the doorway, and he's searching. And I'm like, I don't see anything. We had a little camera on him.
Yep.
Didn't see anything, and so he came back out, and I'm like, all right. And they're like, well, hey, just send him in there again. So I sent him in there again, and then we moved up with the team. He came back out, and then it was almost like, because it was so methodical, they would clear, they would make entry. I would send the dog in right behind them, and he would push forward with them, and we would just move down this hallway. And it was just, like I said, everything slowed down. Mm-hmm. And so it allowed me to just kind of be in the right spot. They called target secure, and so we started searching the outbuildings. And this was like my first success with having the dog. He actually sat on a doorway into a little, I don't know, it was like a little shack. And when our dogs smell odor, they sit their butts on the ground, and it's just a passive alert. And so I called the EOD guy over, and I say, hey, my dog's sitting on this doorway. I don't know what it is. And so they automatically thought it was rigged, because that's what they do over there. And he looked, he cleared it and everything, and sure enough, there was a bunch of mortar rounds in there, so the dog hit on the ammunition, and which was just a cool thing for me anyways. They started to gain confidence in us. We do a couple more ops. The next op I talk about in the book, it's called, it's in the Palm Groves. So I don't know what these guys thought they were doing, but they watched all these guys bring a bunch of RPGs, heavy machine guns into these palm groves. So just palm groves, and everything else is field. So I was like, what do these guys think is going to happen? Like, it just was really odd. And they said, we're going to drop 2 or 4 500-pound bombs on it, and then we're gonna land you guys on the Y. So we're gonna land pretty close, not on the X, but pretty close. And this was my first time being on an opposite helicopter that my team that I was going to run with was on, because we were on the 60s, and there was only so much room on there.
Yeah.
Them and the dog. And so they drop us down in this field, and I'm like, I got to run, like, because we were split up. I ran by myself across this field to get to these guys, and we ended up rolling just in an L-shaped formation and just sending out the dog. Well, as we're sending out the dog, these grenades and stuff are going off, and guys are trying to clear these trenches that these guys had dug. It was really weird. Like, they had palm leaves all over these trenches, so they could be hiding anywhere.
It's probably, hiding from ISR as well.
Yeah. And so we get up to the first building that they bombed, and Digo is like he's barking at the building, trying to get in there, scratching at it, and that usually alerts that the guy is in there. And so this building we can't get into it. It's a small little shack. Well, turns out later they ended up pulling a guy out, like, after we had left, they pulled somebody out of there. So Digo was alerting on this little building, which was, again, another great experience for me. We ended up moving past that little building, and we got to this. Digo was bracketing back and forth. He could smell something, and we had ISR up in the sky telling us, like, hey, the guy's 40 meters or whatever this way. And I'm like, no, there's a guy right here. And he's bracketing, and we get up to these this like wall of reeds that they had built, and it was really weird. I don't know if it was like a fence line or what, but they built this wall, and my dog's sitting there barking at this wall, and I'm like, there's somebody here. And they kept on saying, no, there's a guy down here. He's over here. And I'm like, no, there's one right here. And so our sniper calls over. He says, hey, I found a way to the other side. He said, come down here. And my adrenaline's pumping. Like, I'm just like, it's like when they would beat us during the direct support course, like, you'd be like, how can I keep doing this? But when you're out on the op and you're fucking putting out, it's like you almost forget about the physical energy that you're putting out because of all the adrenaline that's rushing through you. And so we're running over to where he's at, and so we get over there, and I said, hey, he's on the other side about 50 meters. And we sent the dog, and sure enough, he beelined straight to there, and he ends up grabbing this guy by the throat. Like, Digo had the guy by the throat, and he has a fully loaded PKM, and I don't know why he didn't light it off when we were on the other side, but thank God he didn't. And the guy's fighting my dog, and I'm like, I can't get him to come off. like because he'd already loosened up his e-collar. I couldn't correct him to come off. And I looked over at my sniper, and I'm like, hey, dude, I was like, it's not safe for us to move up because he sees the PKM. And I'm like, just take the shot. Like, take a shot. If you can not hit my dog, that would be great. And he ended up putting one through the guy's head, and we moved up, and that's how we knew the PKM was loaded. It's just amazing that he did not. I mean, it's a blessing that he did not open up on us.
Yeah.
We were on the other side. So we pull him off, and then they say, hey, we engaged another guy, and now we're walking through this, like, this water that's, like, runoff, and it's, like, smells, and it's nasty.
Good old Iraqi water.
It's, like, this shit
sewage.
water. It's so gross.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about it right now.
It's good for your skin.
Yeah. That's why they give you the malaria pills. So they said they engaged him, but they're not sure, if he's still alive. So we sent the dog to go find him, and the dog's like traipsing through this water, and he's going on these mounds and then hopping back in, and he ends up finding the guy, and he, just tearing at the guy. The guy's dead. Our guys engaged him before we knew he was dead a couple more times, and then he had a AK there and everything, and so Digo's chewing on this guy in this water, and then I go down to get him and pull him off. Well, as I'm crawling back up this little mound, he fucking pulls me back the other way, and now I'm like head over heels in this water. Now my head's covered in it, and it's just nasty. But that night really proved to those guys that, like, we knew what we were doing. There was other missions before I got blown up that continued to build that trust, but that was that night, like, really cemented in our
trust within the squadron. Like, like, you're now part of us, and that's awesome.
And then from there, I just wanted to be used on everything. But we had another dog handler, a SEAL, who was a dog handler who had his dog, and so that was tough because he had a new dog that wasn't doing quite as well. And that's what happens when you have some new dogs. Like, some do really good, and some need a little bit more training.
Yeah, more experience.
Yeah. And so the night that we went out, Nate Hardy, Mike Koch. So the night that we went out, I took that really hard because I didn't go on that building with them. I went with a different team. I normally ran with their team whenever I was out with them. But because they had thought the threat was at this other building that we went on, and which there was a threat there. We had this, what do they call it? The little birds. Like, they were lighting up this building, and this guy's like, either a suicide vest or something goes off, and I'm like, these rounds are raining down upon, like, on the little bird's right above us.
Yeah.
And you could just feel it, and and at that time we didn't know that they were going to be dealing with another set
H-bid.
No, barricaded shooters.
Barricaded, okay.
Yep. So the target that Mike and Nate were on, the building that they were on, they had the three barricaded shooters in there. I think that's what they found out it was, or how many were there. And so we were dealing with that, and then we had another small building, and the small building only had women and children in it, so it wasn't nothing going on. And then we heard over the radio, we have Eagles down, and I didn't know what that meant. Like, just, I'm being honest with you, like, because even in the medical training, like, I don't recall ever hearing that. Because we went through, like, the pig labs and all that, like, to learn how to bandage people up. I didn't know what that was. So we booked. I've never seen people move so fast. Like, we left our target and went down there, and the dog handler on that building was dealing with trying to get Mike and Nate out of the doorway.
Yeah.
Because they had sent the dog in there, and it was a small building, probably the size of this room, maybe smaller, and they were hiding behind furniture and blankets and stuff, and I guess the dog went in and just didn't really alert to anything. And as soon as they broke the doorway, and so when I saw those two down, laying there when we got there, then I knew, I was like, this, up until then, like, we're winning. Like, we didn't have any casualties, like, we didn't have anybody get hurt, and so it's just and Nate, he helped me with Digo shaving his, because no one wanted to touch Digo. Digo still wanted to bite everybody. No one wanted to help me, and Digo had gotten some barbed wire, a cut on his hind quarter, and he was the only one that was willing to help me. And so seeing him laying there, like, it was like just a gut punch, and I didn't know that I just didn't know what was going on. And Mike Koch, he gave me a Patagonia jacket. When we first got over there, they ordered all this gear for the guys. He's like, hey, did you get your jacket? And I was like, I don't think they ordered me a jacket. He's like, well, here, take mine. And it was just, I was like, no, I don't want your jacket. I was like, I got the standard Navy issue jacket. He's like, no. He's like, you want this jacket. And so I still have his jacket to this day, but seeing those two guys laying there really hit me hard, because they had taken time out to actually interact with me on deployment.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember sitting there playing video games with them, when you don't have nothing to do. And it was the night of the Super Bowl, so we're going out during the Super Bowl, and we come back, and you're like, all these people are at the Super Bowl or celebrating the Super Bowl, mm-hmm. and we're having to send these guys back. And so that was a difficult time.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a huge, like you said, a gut punch, and also a reality check that these are the consequences of this job, that if things, Dev Group, and even, the white side, we train so much so those things hopefully don't happen, and we try to mitigate as much risk, to ourselves while still being able to accomplish the job and get the mission done. But the reality is war, and there's some things that you just aren't in control of, and things happen. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that was a big reality check for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I still, I don't know, I'm just thankful for guys like them. I mean, and then Louis Affront, we ended up going out, I think 4 nights later we went out, and I don't know if it was in connection to the same guy or the same target line, but we had watched them on ISR for the whole day, so we had no thought that they would rig that house, because they moved around normally. They didn't really change anything. And that night they said, we're only taking one dog handler, and we're taking you. And I'm like, okay. I wasn't going to fight it. I mean, it's not, the team leader is a SEAL. He can, if he wants to.
Yeah, he makes the call.
Yeah. But the team wanted Digo. So we were going. And they said, we're going to roll out on these strikers, these little fucking tin cans that you ride into Baqaba. And so we're riding in these things, to Baqaba, Iraq, which is like a city that is a little bit more heavily populated, and it's dense. Like, it's a metro. I want to say it's a metropolitan, but it's just like a city. Like, all the houses are real next together. We always went to the villages. It was just different, and it was really eerie feeling. Getting out of those things and patrolling up to the building. You can hear gunfire in the background, and we get up to the building, and they said, "Hey, we're going to do a call out on the building, just because it's been known for HBIDs." And I said, okay, I'm going to just position myself away from the women and children that are coming out, because, again, Digo being Digo, I had to kind of protect him from himself. He wanted to bite everything. I mean, as soon as he smelt, whatever smell he smelled of those people, like, it's just something in him, like, lit on fire. It's like when we trained him on the bite suit. As soon as they see that bite suit, they're just, it's like eyes roll back in the back of their head, and they're, wanting to go full force. So I positioned myself kind of a little ways away, and my team leader, Mikey, always said, your biggest threat probably is going to come from behind you. So I just always look to the back, because if everybody's looking at the target building, then what the hell am I going to do? If you got all these SEALs that are,
You got eyes on there, I'll take the rear.
So they all start coming out. And then a couple guys came out the front door with AKs, and they engaged them in the front door, and they're laying on the ground, and we don't know if they're playing possum or not. And so he sends my team leader sends one of the ladies in to go pull down all the blankets and curtains and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. and so that we can send the dog in and he can make his way through. And she comes back out, and that's it. Like, we're just like, all right, cool. So he says, dog up, and I get up next to him. I say, dog up, and he says, send it. And so I sent the dog in, and sure as shit, Digo goes right for the dead bodies. And we didn't know they were dead at the time, but if they're playing possum, you're surely going to find out. And he starts just dragging them around, and I'm like, I call over the team leader, and I said, I'm not going to get this dog to go past these guys because he's going to go for the free bite every time. And I said, we're going to have to move up a little bit closer in order for me to send my dog in. And I've kind of held on to this because if I could have sent my dog in, like from past those people, if I had the ability to, it might have saved us from getting hurt and from Louis being killed. So I kind of hold on to that even to this day. It's like, if there was anything else I could have done to get that dog to go in, I would have done it. And I see this big bay window, and I always look for other ways to send the dog in than the front door, just because if somebody's waiting there, they're going to look for, like, that's the first thing they're going to see. So I always want to give the dog the opportunity. And so I go and I kneel down in front of the big bay window, and the team leader says, we're going to put a frag through the front door, and then you can send the dog. And so they get the call over the radio, they send it in. I'm kneeling down, and I know that the blast from the grenade could probably come through that window, so I kind of duck my head down. As it goes off, I lift my head up, and I could just feel this immense pressure at my face. And I'm just like, this isn't good. Like, I don't know what this is, but it is only a split second.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I had this thought for a split second that this isn't good, and everything was dark. Like, everything went dark. And the building had detonated. They think that the guy was on the third or second floor. When he heard the grenade go off, he detonated whatever explosives they had in the building. So
Yeah.
I'm buried underneath this pile of rubble. I talk about it in the book. I had this God moment. Like, still gives me chills to this day. I think 30 seconds later, they start to uncover me. But before that, like, I wake up and I cannot move. And I'm thinking that I was, like, buried alive, like your worst thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't move. I was just, and everything was dark. And, excuse me, I have allergies right now. Texas is trying to kill me. The allergies down in Texas are no joke. So I can't move, and I'm like, somebody forgot about me. Like, because I remembered I was on an op.
Yeah.
And I'm like, maybe I got buried alive. I don't know. And I'm calling for my dog. I'm yelling for my dog, but nobody can hear me. And then all of a sudden, these blocks get lifted up off of me. And I see, I think it was Chuck. He's the first guy I saw. And he's like, are you okay? And he's like, I think so. My nod is hanging. Like, I have, you had nods. And then one of them was like hanging. It was attached to a lanyard. It was hanging down, like slapping me in the face. And I'm like, I think I lost my nods. And he's like, don't worry about that. Like, that's the last thing you need to worry about right now. And so I was like, where's Digo? And he's like, Digo's over there trying to bite everybody right now. And he's like, let me get some more of this stuff off of you. And we're covered in this, like, barbed wire and stuff and, like, rebar and whatnot. And he comes back over to me and he says, hey, he's like, your dog's trying to bite everybody again. Because Digo had, I was attached to a lanyard with Digo, and the blast was so strong that it sent him like 20 feet away. Like, it snapped the metal buckle. And I reached into my pocket and with my left wrist, and I realized I couldn't move my left wrist, and it hurt really bad. And then I realized my wrist was broken. So I was like, oh, that's not good. So I reached in with my right hand, and I handed him this mesh muzzle. I said, hey, put this on him. He won't do anything. And so they put it on him and was able to get him out. And they came back over, and they started uncovering more stuff. And I see them trying to get Luke because they're yelling for Louie. Excuse me, they're yelling for him. And he was underneath the carport at the time. And the carport had just come down on top of him. So I think they I think they went into one of the strikers and got these airbags that they use to lift whenever they roll over, and they use that to kind of
jaws of life.
Yeah, to get him out. Mm-hmm. And so they're working on him. They're uncovering me, and then like 2 guys come over to me, and I look down at my legs, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look good. Like I have a leg going that way, a leg going that way, and 2 guys tried lifting me up by my shoulders. And Chuck tells me to this day, he's like, I've never heard somebody scream like that before. And turns out both femurs were shattered. So I shattered both my femurs 5 times in one and 7 times in another. And they put me right back down. They're like, yeah, we're not moving you. And so at that point, they didn't know if I was bleeding out internally.
Yeah.
And I guess the mortality rate on 1 broken femur's not good, but then having 2 is pretty bad. And they ran out of litters because 2 other guys, 3 or 4 other guys had gotten hurt, and they were trying to get them out. And finally they come back over, and they're like, this is going to hurt really bad. And I was like, yep. And they picked me up. 4 of them picked me up, and it did hurt really bad. They laid me in the striker, and to this day I'll never forget it. They laid me right on top of Louie. We were on the aisle, the floor.
Yeah.
And they laid me right on top of him, and I look over at the PJ, and I'm like, hey, is he gone? Because I'm delusional.
You're right.
I'm like, I'm chewing on those fentanyl lollipops that they give you. Mm-hmm. Like I had about 4 of them already. Like I just would eat them, and they were giving me all of theirs, and that's when I knew, like, he looked over at me and he said he's gone, and this sounds kind of morbid, but laying next to him, like, kind of got me through that part to the helicopter, and then I blacked out a few more times.
No, it doesn't sound morbid. Well, what do you think? What part of that helped you get through?
Like just him being there, and then he kept me warm.
Yeah,
I was cold.
You were in shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know, man. It was just it was a shitty feeling. And then they get us back to Balad, and then they unload us, and I could hear Digo losing his shit in the tent hospital that they brought us into. And the doctor comes over to me, and he's like, hey, has anybody straightened your legs yet? And I'm like, the hell are you talking about? They look straight right now. And he's like, no. He's like, you would know if they straightened them. And he calls over 2 corpsmen or whatever the Army equivalent was, and he's like, I need you to lay on top of him, and we're going to straighten his legs real quick before we put you into the MRI machine. Excuse me. So they grab each leg, and I can still feel it in my body right now how that felt, but he grabs my foot, and he just gives it a quick shake and a pull, and there again I screamed as as loud as I could, and I was like, I hope, and I talked to the guys later on, obviously years later, and I'm like, I hope you guys don't think I was a pussy for screaming. And they're like, no, you're completely fine in being in pain, and so I just I know it's like I don't know, it's just a weird.
Oh, believe me, I know. Everybody, no one wants to sound like
a
little bitch, but it's like, dude, no one else has gone through that. Like, there's nobody that could take that. I mean, pulling traction on a broken femur, and I've done it before on people. That's
what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah. So usually what they do is that you if you have the equipment, you put a traction splint on there, and it's a slow crank, right? And it cranks it back into place. But if they did it obviously manually, with their,
he yanked as hard as he could.
Yeah, that's pure, because there's no gradual progression. Okay, it hurts a little bit, pop, and all right. That's full on. Here you go. You're getting the full benefit. So yeah, dude.
So he takes me out. They wheel me over to the MRI machine, and they're like, we're gonna put you under. And at this point, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I thought maybe I was going to probably die. I hadn't died yet, so that was a good sign. the doctor or the priest comes over to me and he says, "Hey," he's like, "I'm going to pray over you real quick." And up until this point, I had just been to just a Lutheran church growing up. Like they forced to go to church, right? Like not on my own.
Yep.
Of finding God, right?
I grew up Catholic. I know the feeling.
Yeah. So he's like, "Do you mind if I pray over you?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll take anything at this point." And I was like, "Well, if this is it." So my wife was pregnant, and I get teary-eyed thinking about this. My wife was pregnant at the time. So she was 9 months pregnant when I got blown up. And I was like, well, I'm probably not going to get to see my son if this ends the way I think it's going to end. And so I said sure. And so next thing I know, I wake up and I have an erector set on the outside of my femurs, each femur screw. I have bolts at the bottom of the femur, the top of the femur, and that just keeps it pretty much steady. And the Master Chief comes over. He's a squadron Master Chief. He came over and talked to me, and he's like, "Hey, we got to call your wife. Do you want to call her, or do you want us to call her?" And I was like, "I'm just gonna call her. I'll do it because I don't need her worrying." And I called her, and she's like, "Well, I'm already doing laundry." And she's like, she's like, "I knew something." She's like, "I just felt like something happened to you because when Mike and Nate got killed, when they died, they shut down everything over there, like no communications." Right?
Yeah, they call it going. I forget what the
River City.
Yeah, River City. That's it.
So, I had made the dumb mistake of calling my wife at a certain time every time I was over there to make sure how she was doing with the baby and everything. And so she's like, "I knew something had happened." She's like, "I wasn't sure if it happened to you, but I felt like something happened." And the command hasn't even notified her yet back in Virginia Beach. And to be honest with you, I wrote in my book, the kennel master on the board up in the main buildings, like they had all the list of the casualties, and they had mine as unknown, like so they had or expectant or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they thought they didn't know it was an HPID. They didn't know if I got shot. They didn't even know if I was alive or dead. So they were waiting to find that out. I guess they didn't know. And that's why they waited so long to contact her.
Yeah, and that's always, I've dealt with that numerous times, and that's always a touchy subject for people. But I understand the point. When they do go River City and they're like, "Hey, you can't call anybody or anything," because I've seen it go both ways. And I'm sure you've heard guys are still alive, but they're just not able to call back or communicate. But then wives will get the message that they're dead. And then you have this poor wife, for the next 3 days, sometimes thinking that their husband's gone. And, it's also vice versa. So yeah, it's always a finicky thing, man. It's harder on the command too, because they're the ones who have to make that call.
Yeah. And I wasn't mad or anything.
No,
I was kind of happy they didn't bother her, because if you don't know the whole extent of it, why bring her into it yet? So I ended up going to Germany, Bethesda. I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit. I ended up getting 2 rods shoved down my femurs, a plate in my wrist, and having to learn how to walk all over again. And to this day, I don't know how I made it back and deployed again. Even then, it took me 9 months to recover, which the doctors were like, we're going to talk about med boards and this and that. And I just refused to accept it. And so I went back to the command 9 months later. They sent me over to Chicago to do rehab because my son was about to be born.
Mm-hmm.
And since I couldn't help, my wife grew up there, and her parents were going to help out with that. And sent me over to Chicago. I looked at the bill. It was well over $200,000 in fixing me again. And 9 months of rehab. I went back to the command in September of that year, and I said I was good to go. And they said, "Well, we're gonna skip this deployment with your squadron." And even to this day, they're like, "I don't know how you did that so fast." Lou Langless, he had me come talk to the direct support course and explain the importance of, because I had my blowout, all my med stuff, like my blowout kit and everything when everything was going on. And he's like, I want you to talk to these guys on the importance of this course and like really how it helped you. And so I did that. And he's like, so what's your plan? And I said, he's like, are you going to retire? Or I said, no, I'm coming back. And he looked at me, he's like, you're coming back? I said, yeah, I'm coming back. I'm going to come back and make it through this. And Twan, a really good friend of mine, when I redeployed back over to Afghanistan in January so a year later, a year after I get blown up, less than a year, he tells me this day, he's like, I never expected one of our own to come back from your injuries, but for you to do that, he's like, that's pretty remarkable.
It's impressive.
And so I ended up redeploying with another dog because Digo was having some PTSD issues or whatever. Like he just would not engage like he normally would have. He had went with a new handler with the squadron, so they were having issues. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go be a courier. I'll go help him train train Digo, but I would like to take another dog. And so I took another dog and deployed there. And again, I'm kind of fast tracking, but I did 3 more deployments, and then my last deployment was.
Were they all to Afghanistan?
So the other 3 were to Afghanistan because we had stopped going to Iraq. Yeah. So,
yeah. I remember during that time. Yeah.
Yeah. Just another one.
How were those deployments?
They were great. I got paired up with other dogs, like just badasses, and again, just my favorite dog was Brando during the time. That was my last deployment, like I told you about. Brando, he could do the work, but he could have the off switch, and so the guys were able to. Like I'd come out, and sometimes Brando would just be out in the courtyard playing with the guys.
Yeah.
We had a little tiki hut there where we would, hang out at night whenever we weren't going out.
Yeah,
and so,
decompress.
And so he would be there, and I had him out especially a lot after extortion, just because it just was good to have. It's just good.
Yeah,
to have
that
a
was
dog.
a rough time for everybody.
Yeah, and he just he just really got me through that, and then I don't know. I mean, it was a good time having a dog like that. So again, I believe God puts you with what you need, and that especially.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, dude, I think it's remarkable. That happened. You got jacked up as bad as you did, and even not only like the recovery that's the fastest recovery for those injuries I've heard of. But that's just the mindset you had of like, no, I want to go back. I know that you probably earned the respect of a lot of people just making that decision, because that's not easy,
Yeah, psychologically, it's definitely. I think it was more mind over anything physical, and then I remember going back a year later, and the first mission wasn't bad. Like it was just regular 3K, 3.5K walk in. Like it wasn't bad. I remember the second one, and they're like, we're going to drop you into this bowl. It's like a little bowl, and there's about 3 inches of snow. Well, when they dropped us in, I was watching guys move slower and slower. Well, they dropped us into 3 feet of snow, and we had to climb out of it. And I just was like, wow, this is really going to put my legs to the test, because you don't want to fall out. Like,
yeah,
anybody that falls out, like you're pretty much gone.
You're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's having to hump through that and all of that. It was interesting.
So you did those 3 deployments, right? How many years you got in at this point after those 3 deployments?
I was in 8 years.
8 years.
8 or 9 years, somewhere in there.
Okay, so that's usually the decision point, right? Of are you going to re-enlist, stay in for the long run, or
yeah. I wasn't sure if I was going to stay at Damneck. I just wasn't sure during that deployment. But then when extortion happened, that was like really a breaking point for me. I was like, I can't do this no more. Like, because I was already struggling with. After that, I was struggling with PTSD, and they were going to send me back out into the fleet. And so going back out into the fleet from doing what we did there.
Yeah, that's not a good call.
So I got stuck in an office as a kennel master, which is, again, it was my choice, made to go do it. But I'm struggling with PTSD. I'm addicted to narcotics. I was addicted to Vicodin. Like I was using Vicodin to make my days. I would like to say I was a very I could operate as an addict. I could get all my work done, but it was
Well, you were dependent on the Vicodin to get the work done.
Yeah, I mean, my body hurt. Mentally, I just wasn't. It stuck me in an office, right? Like in an office by myself, and when I was used to being around the guys, and I was just over at Little Creek, so I knew they were right down the road. And even the Little Creek, you know, the SEALs there, you know, helicopters going over and stuff like that. Like that shit's real. Like the mental part
well,
of that.
yeah, just those like sounds, stuff like that can really trigger, the anxiety or those feelings you get, right?
And I was back out in the fleet with people that didn't understand. Luckily, I had a chief's mess, so I made chief when I went to Little Creek, and I felt ashamed because I was like crying, and I would go hide in my office. Like I remember there would be times. Driving down the road, I'd have to stop because I couldn't go into the base being in the way I was. And, you know, again, I had a chief's mess that it was odd that they actually, like they took care of me.
Did they know what was going on with you?
Oglesby, Senior Chief Oglesby, he knew what was going on. I believe he knew what was going on. I had a security officer at the time, and I don't think he understood why I was going to all of the psych appointments I was going to. Like they wouldn't even let me arm up because I was on they put me on this medicine that, you know, what is it called?
Antipsychotic meds.
Yeah, it's like depression meds.
Yeah.
And so they don't let you arm up. But when I was at Dam Neck, I was on them. And I was, and so like that, like they took away my ability to do anything. And it was just, again, it was really difficult. And I knew I needed to make a change. And I was like,
how was the family life at that time with the wife and the new kid? That
was our hardest time. I mean, this was 2012 now because I you know, obviously recovered, and we had a daughter who was, you know, she's now 3, my son's 5, and marriage is like rough. Like it was hard. Yeah. You know, her having to deal with me, like I give her props that she had to deal.
It takes a strong woman to deal with, you know, guys that have gone and done that job and come back with the issues and the repercussions from doing that job.
Yeah. And, you know, again, like just being back in the fleet, like I had it broke now, but I had an extortion 17 bracelet, and I was going through chief initiation, and I had this guy come up to me he didn't have a Master Chief hat on or anything. Like I didn't know who he was. And he's like, shit, mate, that's not authorized. And this was a year after, this was coming up on the anniversary of it. And I was like, I'd like to see a motherfucker take it off of me. And he's like, well, really? And he's like, do you know who you're talking to? And I'm like,
I don't care.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't care. And another chief that was there, like, pulled me aside and just was like, come with me. Like, we'll pull you out of this for right now.
Was this during the chief initiation?
It was. But it turned out to be a really great opportunity to talk to him because I went and talked to him afterwards. I didn't know he was, I believe it was the USS Cole, like he was on there, and he had said that he had went through some similar issues just with, you know, psychological stuff, I guess. And so I don't know. Again, it's one of those things, like it turned out to not be a.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
I think I could have been a little bit more tactful, but again, the day that I did that, they took us on this run, and they were like, they had all these fallen service members that were chiefs. And so as we're doing this run, we had to read this card, and the first one that pops up is Adam Brown's card. And I couldn't read it. Like I just was like, I was in shock that it snuck up on me. I didn't know that they were going to do that. You know what I mean? Like you just don't expect that to happen. So I don't know. It was just, it was hard.
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, that's, you went through a lot.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of trauma. And then, of course, back then, I mean, and still now, I believe, nobody really knows how to deal with that kind of trauma in the Navy or in the military in general, right? The attitude that's passed down is just suck it up and keep doing your job, right? And that's the attitude that most of us all have, right? Which is, I think, one of the many reasons we all end up getting addicted to pills. We'll do whatever we have to keep doing the job and keep operating. Much like, you compare it to NFL players or, these professional athletes. It's the same premise, right? It's like, just keep playing. Just keep going out there and performing. Oh, you're hurt? Here, take this. Oh, you're hurt. And they, and I will say I don't blame the command or like the institution. It's just what's bred into us, and it's who we are. We're never going to quit, right?
Never going to quit or even want to ask for help.
No, and that's, I think that that's also to the detriment of us as well. Right. Hopefully they're getting better at spotting these issues when they arise and actually being like, hey, dude, let's go take a time out, and not making people feel ashamed for doing it. Because it is normal, man. It's everything that you felt, everything that you went through. It's not. There's nothing wrong with you, and that's what I try to explain to a lot of the guys I know. It's like, no, dude. There's repercussions for doing this job, and no human being is really supposed to see the things that we see, do the things that we do, and then come out of it like, I'm all good. Like, we're not robots. We're human beings too. So
that's what my wife has told me. She's like, what you went through, she's like, no one would expect somebody to have to go through that. Like, all the stuff when we went to go pack up the guy's stuff from extortion, right? Like, we having to go pack up somebody's stuff and send it back to, and all of, like, there was so many. Yeah. And then having to go through all the guns and everything that came off that helicopter, like she's like, you should have a little bit more grace for yourself. Like, it's difficult. So yeah, I mean, it was a big transition going back to the fleet, and then I finally was like, I made chief, and then I got selected for LDO, and I had a lot of people that are like, why are you going for a med board? And I said, I can't do this no more. Like, my body hurts. I can't, my mind, like, if I can't do what I was doing before, I just want to be done. Yeah. And the surgeon was like, well, you have every right to do a med board. He's like, I wanted to put you in 2 years ago because I kept coming to him. And so they put me in for a med board, and turned out to be the best decision of my life. And I think because now I'm doing Patriot Dog Training, which is a company that I started. I didn't know you could take like dog training, the skill in the military, and then take it out, and people would actually pay you for training their dog. I didn't realize people cared that much about their animals, but it turns out they love their dogs. And I'll
have to send you my 3 French bulldogs because they don't listen for shit.
Well, French bulldogs are just defiant in general.
Which is why I like them.
They don't care. Yeah. So I got to start that, and then I just lining up this podcast. Like, we closed on our new property yesterday, and so like I had never left the military. I probably would have never done this, but honestly, working with you guys and like your drive to like that you guys showed me, your drive to like innovate and do something new. Like those guys at the command, always trying new things, like trying to make something better. And so I was able to take that into entrepreneurship, which I didn't have an entrepreneur background because my mom worked at the post office. She worked at the stockyards in Sault Ste. Paul. And so my family didn't have that. Yeah. And I certainly didn't have that mindset.
You and me both. Yeah. Believe me. How's that been so far? Like, we're getting out, transitioning, from being in the military to the civilian sector, and then doing the whole entrepreneurship. How's that been?
Well, that's been good. When I started writing my book in 2013, I was writing it because I wanted to give something back to my kids, right? And you know, I don't know.
Did you
been,
find it a difficult decision to write the book?
It was definitely a difficult decision just because of, you know, I'm leading this into the Patriot, but I had started with that because I wanted to give something back to my kids. And quickly after doing that and telling people, I got all this hate, right? Because from guys that were still in.
Yep.
And they just don't understand. And so, you know, I don't want to ever forget. Like, there's a reason why my hat is black and I have this yellow logo. It's the Gold Squadron colors. Like, I always want to like every time I put it on, I remember the guys. But it's my logo, and it's just something that reminds me of them, and I never want to forget. Well, I found out my grandparents, my two grandmas, they both have dementia, and so I wanted to write a book so I would not forget. You know, so it'd always be out there. And you know, I started Patriot Dog Training because of the military, and I wanted to pay tribute to the guys. And so if you walk in my building, like you'll see all the guys from Extortion, you'll see Mike and Nate's. I have it there so people will ask me, what is that?
Yes.
Why?
So you can tell their story.
I can tell their story, right? Yeah, I mean, it's great that business makes me money or whatever, but money is not was never the driving focus of it. It was so I could tell more people about, you know, those guys. And so I've had a couple guys from the command that have come in and they're like, wow, this is really awesome. And, you know, that's been my driving force behind it. And so, yeah, it's been great.
Good. And, you know, I'll give you a piece of advice. All right. Because I remember when we had the conversation before you got here, and you were like, hey, you know, we're working out, you coming down here, being on the podcast, and you were like, hey, I just want you to know, and you said at the beginning, like, I'm not a SEAL, I'm not this, I'm not that. You know, that doesn't matter, man.
Right.
I'm telling you right now. I mean, it's great. You're like, hey, just let you know I wasn't one, but that doesn't define, like, you. It doesn't make you any, like, lesser than a SEAL or a guy, you know, at the squadrons. And you have earned the spot where you're at right now. You've earned the reason to write that book. All right. You've done the job. And for guys that are giving you all this hate that are still in, and believe me, it's not because you're a dog handler or you weren't a SEAL. It's because those individuals, because they give the same amount of hate to other SEALs as well who want to do the same thing. Like, hey, I want to do something in remembrance, right? Maybe somebody they lost, or like you said, I want to do something so my kids will be able to read this when they're older and hopefully pass that down to their kids, right? It's like a lineage thing. The guys that are in, and I tell guys this too, I'm like, you can't get mad at them, right? Because it is sort of, you know, it's hurtful, like, to have people talk trash or spew hate at you. But here's the thing, they don't know any better. They live in that bubble, and I was part of that bubble, you know, and that's why I can't get mad at them, because I was the same way when I was in, like, oh, how dare you go out there and tell stories or whatever about things that we've done, all right? And that's why those guys that are in and spewing that hate,
it's not even ones that are in still, right? Like, but
or guys that are,
it's people I never really truly served with too, right? Like, they just,
exactly, they don't even know you.
I've met them,
and a lot of it's jealousy.
Yeah.
A lot of it is like, how dare you go be successful?
Yeah.
How dare you do something and using your past history to tell a story, right? You just have to let that go, man.
Oh, of course.
Just ignore. I mean, I'm not saying that you're not letting it go. But this is advice I tell people, especially, you know, other team guys that are making the same decision, right? There's a way to tell these stories that's respectfully, and that's what you've done. And like, as long as you're being respectful and you are bringing honor to those individuals that are no longer with us, or for the individuals that you served alongside with, then there's nothing wrong with doing it.
Well, my reasoning has changed too, even since then. Like, I started, it was about my kids, and then it was about remembering. And then now it's like, you see all these people that are just lost, and they think that nothing is possible, right? Unless the government's going to help help them get somewhere,
yeah.
right? Oh, you can't do it on your own. Like let's help you. And so a lot of my life before wasn't necessarily focused around God, right? But as my life, I want people to see as my life went, He was there with me. Like yes, it was me doing it, but when people said I couldn't, He said, no, but I can.
Yep.
And it's like this song that I'm stuck on. Like I listen to Christian music a lot now. I don't listen, like in my book, I tell the readers, like, this is the music I would listen to before I go on an op. I'd plug it into my headset. Like non-Christian music, like Marilyn Manson, like the Beautiful People. Like
pump up music to get you,
Yeah, and so I wanted to tell people, and again, this song, it's called God's Problem, God's Problems. It's a Christian music singer. Tell somebody that anything is possible. And so if you look at my life, like no father, right? I didn't talk about this in the beginning. I was molested when I was 11, right after my dad went to prison. Mm-hmm. Everybody told me I couldn't when I was, blown up, other than my close family, my wife. And then getting out and being addicted to pills, like anything's possible.
Yep. As long as you have faith. Yeah. I mean, it's like that story. All right, I'm probably going to jack it up, but it's the one where, there's two sets of footsteps. Someone's walking, it's like when Jesus is walking with you, and then all of a sudden it turns into one, and you're like, oh, Jesus, why did you leave me? There's only one set of footprints here now. And he's like, that's my footprints. That's when I was carrying you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it.
Yeah, man. Dude, so the book is supposed to come out in early release December?
Early release on Ballast Books, their website, ballastbooks.com, I believe it is. So those will all be hard copies with signatures, and then it'll come out on Amazon in January. And then
The Underdog?
The Underdogs.
Underdogs.
Yeah. Well, Kurt Warner did The American Underdog, and I had this title since, honest to God, had this title. I still have it on the old-ass computer that I started it out on. I just wanted it to, truly felt like underdog from the beginning of my life. Again, I go back to not having a father, right?
Yeah.
So The Underdogs. So I got the dogs in there, and, they start out a very hard life too. Like for them to get to where they end up at is very difficult, and so only the best make it there. And it comes out in end of December before Christmas, and then January.
Nice. Yeah, we'll put the link when this podcast comes out to have people know where to find it.
Absolutely.
And dude, it's awesome. I'm glad you're writing the book. I think it's a awesome and compelling story, and I'm sure it's going to inspire others, and that's the point, right? It's as long as you're helping others, because the world is full of underdogs. And so, good on you, brother.
Thank you
for doing that.
I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure having you on this podcast, man. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for going into details on some of the traumatic events. I know that can be difficult at times.
Well, I know you had you like you said, you had your best friend,
extortion,
and I just there's all kinds of details, and I just want to make sure I show respect and
do
honor
it justice
to those guys, and
I'm sure you are, dude.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
All right, out. Yeah, man. Great job, brother.
Sorry, man. I just was